Tribe Nation, I'm here in the beautiful city of Chicago. My name is Morgan Elise Johnson. I'm publisher of The Tribe, your favorite revolutionary Black-owned publication. Crime narrative season, which is the period where we call the time where crime is rising in Chicago and crime narratives are proliferating in the news media. That season is winding down, at least so we thought. But I do want to talk about the political narratives that have come out of crime narrative season so far. First, Merawi Gerima Johnson and progressives, we thought, had successfully beat the fear-mongering narratives around Black youth and crime in Chicago. And this is pretty significant, if you ask me. It's really difficult to pierce through mainstream crime narratives that proliferate the media ecosystem every day. But we saw a concerted effort from our city's leadership to mention that crime was down in almost every public appearance that we saw from him since he testified before a congressional committee in Washington, D.C. Additionally, his repeated talking point around investing in young people reframed the conversation around crime into one about investing in young people. I don't see sensational crime narratives as something that can be defeated with statistics of positive safety trends, because I don't believe that the power brokers who push crime narratives are interested in solutions or helping Black people live abundantly. The fear-mongering related to intra-community harm is a narrative tool that supports the prison industrial complex, period. So even though crime has been trending down in Chicago and in cities all across this country, we are here preparing to face military troops in our city, thanks to President Trump's so-called crackdown. So I have some guests that I want to talk to today. You all have been asking for video, so we're going to give that to you. So this is our first time. We've been doing this for a while, so I need y'all to be gentle with us, all right? But I want to bring on some guests, some people who are in DC to let us know what they've been seeing on the ground. First, I have Washington, DC Councilmember Zachary Parker.
Thanks for
Hi,
having me.
Zach, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I finally made it.
You finally made it to the tribe. So first, I'm gonna just give a full disclaimer. We obviously, we went to school together, we went to Northwestern together, and look at where we are now.
Yes,
I have a publication. You made it all the way to DC. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey to the role that you serve right now?
absolutely. I would be remiss if not also acknowledge I'm from Chicago, born and raised. I grew up on the south side of the city. So this moment is important both for what's happening in DC, but what the administration is saying is going to happen in cities like Chicago and across the country. After Northwestern, I went on to teach in New Orleans. I went to grad school in New York, and I've been on the council since 2023. I'm rounding out my first year. I'm the chairperson of the Committee on Women's Affairs here. I'm a former educator, and so my passion is very much about how do we improve the lives of working class Washingtonians, creating pathways and opportunities for our young people and their families, and ensuring that those who are historically disadvantaged and marginalized have a place.
Thanks again for being here. So I really wanted to bring on voices from DC because you all are experiencing the military occupation right now. So for our audience, for Chicagoans, for your family members who will potentially face these same forces, I would want you to share your experience. What entities are currently on the ground patrolling the streets of DC right now?
And I think it's really important that you accurately frame it as an occupation. That is what we are experiencing here in DC. Many may not realize DC is not a state. We are a city operating on state level functions and have long been fighting for DC statehood. And that cause is made even more important now, right? We have the National Guard from DC, as well as National Guardsmen from many Republican states like Ohio and South Carolina, Mississippi and Louisiana, that are spread across our city at metro stations on federal properties. On top of that, the Trump administration announced that they were arming National Guardsmen. People that don't know our citizens, don't know our communities, are now armed on our streets in direct conflict with residents. On top of that, we have a surge of federal officers, including the FBI and the DEA and the Border Control, and you name it, all of the alphabet soup spread across the city. And you've likely seen many images of harassing residents and detaining individuals, doing pretextual stops in roadways, um, causing havoc in a lot of ways, and criminalizing things that normally would go unbothered. For instance, having a beer on your porch, or someone not having their ID as they're trying to get to and from school. And then the third group is about ICE activity. That is something that we've seen across the country, but we have seen an intensified ramp up of ICE raids across the city. Hundreds of individuals have been detained. As recent as last week, a couple was detained as they were trying to get their child to school. Families are being ripped apart. And all of this is in the name of making DC safer. You mentioned it in the outset. Like any major city, we have our work to do on crime, but crime is down in DC. We had reached a 30-year low in 2024, and this year we're 26% even lower than we were last year in terms of crime. I think it is a losing proposition and a losing narrative to debate crime, especially with national Republicans who have this war on crime as part of their national political agenda. It is always going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy to have major cities where there's an influx of guns, drugs, and poverty um, to see elements of crime. Instead, we need to properly frame this for what it is, which I think is a fascist attempt to push the bounds of democracy, to militarize our cities, and to criminalize Black and brown cities like Chicago and like DC.
Yeah, I want you to talk a little bit more about that. How specifically is this affecting Black neighborhoods and Black residents of Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, like I said, like all of this is confronting residents of every background, but it is not surprising that when you have pretextual stops or that you're surging federal officers in certain communities in DC, that's largely in Southeast or in even in Ward 5, the community that I represent, you're going to encounter more Black and brown folk, and in some contexts, lower income folk that makes it easier to criminalize them. This is also on the heels of the Trump administration rolling out new executive orders to bring back cash bail. Like as a country and as a city, we did away with that in the 90s, which all of this, I believe, is an attempt to criminalize more people, keep them detained for longer. And what we're seeing here is a concerted attempt, while the ICE raids are targeting mostly our migrant and Latino communities, the surge of federal officers, I would say, is being felt broadest in our Black and brown communities. There have been hundreds of arrests, and the most concerning is many of these arrests are resulting in no conviction. So people are being detained, they're having to go to court, in some instances losing their jobs, countless days, hours being devoted to this, all for them to ultimately be released because the charges posed against them are weak or non-existent in the first place. The intent is cruelty.
So, how is this supposed to be a response to crime? Is there any coordination with local law enforcement? Are they responding to 911 calls, for instance?
So there is coordination. So DC is in a very unique place. So DC, even before this federal overreach and takeover attempt, had to work with federal officers. Our U.S. attorney, for instance, prosecutes local crimes as well as federal crimes because we are not a state. Our court system is part of the federal court system, for instance. And so the district is very used to operating with federal authorities like the FBI, the DEA, and others. What is happening now, though, is that you have a surge of individuals that don't know our residents and or communities
that are confronting them. Some of them in masks, many of them armed, many of them seeking confrontation, seemingly. And as a city and our MPD force is trying to do what we can to coordinate and corral what is happening. And fortunately, we haven't had any major blowups or deadly incidents, but that is certainly a concern when you have this type of influx of outsiders policing a city. The other thing I would just say is, um, if this was truly about crime, I would imagine we would be seeking to work together more collaboratively and address the root causes of crime. We know what addresses crime. That is not what is being attempted here, and instead, it seems like it's a lot of fear mongering and cruelty, which perhaps is part of the national republic.
For people who are detained, what are local officials directing people to do? Like, where are they being held? And, like, what is the process?
I For those detained on criminal matters, they are taken to our local jail. They are processed like ordinary individuals. Again, though, they have their day in court, and what we're seeing is that the cases against them are very weak. Individuals are being detained, for instance, like I said, for drinking beer on their porch. When that gets in front of a judge, it's being thrown out, but that doesn't mean that that person wasn't detained for days or weeks at a time while they're waiting their court date. There was individuals that was detained by ICE that was able to produce their papers, but they were still held overnight, which is a really scary idea when you think about it. And as I say to everybody, right now the target seems to be on immigrants. Tomorrow it could be black people and/or any other category of individuals, and that is why we should be really concerned. And so we are seeing a surge in arrests, a surge in stops, a surge in court cases, so much so that the courts here are saying they can't keep up with it. We're seeing the president tout that there's no more crime in DC, which is ridiculous. Of course, there's crime because, again, like any major city, there's crime. This, again, it seems to be part of a broader national effort. I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge that there is a tension at play here. I heard the remarks of Mayor Johnson, and it was welcome to see the mayor fighting back, standing up to say, we are not going to criminalize the residents of Chicago. There's a tension currently in DC between those that want to acquiesce or be conciliatory and those that are wanting us to resist. The common refrain is that we don't have power or we can't do anything about it, but we know how these fascist movements work. Once you seize control of a capital, it's easy for the rest of the dominoes to fall. So that is why I think everybody should be paying acute attention to what's happening in DC and making sure it doesn't happen in Chicago and cities across the country.
What can public officials do? What can you do as a council member?
I think we need to be clear-eyed and educate people about what this moment really represents. Again, this isn't about crime. For every debate we're engaged in about crime, we're missing the real agenda, which is a constant effort to push the bounds of democracy, to paint outside of the lines, to flout court rulings and the law. It is unconstitutional for the Trump administration to send the military to Illinois. But if we are talking about crime, people are not talking about the illegality of that, for instance. So, speaking up, I think making sure residents know their rights. We have distributed Know Your Rights and resources that residents should know they have a right to record incidents with the police and other federal law enforcement. They should know they have a right to ask why they're being stopped or whether or not they are free to go. They have a right to legal representation, and there's a number of organizations here doing that important work, as I know there is in Chicago. And then lastly, I think it's about resisting. We are stronger together, and I know that kind of sounds cliche, but by standing in solidarity, folk in DC and Chicago and LA and across the country, we are stronger than the fear mongering and this attempted takeover is against us.
Thank you so much for your time. Are you going to stick around or do you have to get off? I have some other guests that I love to bring on.
I'm happy to stick around.
Okay, great. So I would like to add Merawi Gerima to the conversation as well as Richard Wallace. They are community organizers. Merawi, you've been organizing on the ground in DC, but you've also done some work in Chicago as well. Tell us about your connection to Chicago.
Yeah, thank you for having me. In Chicago, I organize with the Chicago Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression. We fight for community control over the police. It's an organization that's been around since the 70s, came out of the fight to free Davis. We have 30 chapters around the country. So I'm in D.C., Alliance Against Political Repression. So that's what I've been doing here since before the announcement, since Trump's announcement of federal troops coming into the city.
We also have Richard Wallace here on the ground in Chicago. How are you doing, Rich?
Busy but good. Busy but
Tell us
good.
a little bit about your work here in Chicago.
Yeah, my name is Richard Wallace. I'm the founder of an organization called Equity and Transformation, also known as E.A.T. And we organize workers in the informal economy. A lot of our folks are forced out of employment due to their background, due to ableism, and they end up having to hit the streets to make ends meet. And we felt like that voice was essential in the direction of our city. So we began to organize with and for Black informal workers back in 2018.
Merawi, what is resistance looking like on the ground in DC?
In DC, it's looking actually quite encouraging. What's happening in DC right now is there's a combination of organized efforts and spontaneous efforts to resist the occupation of DC, Trump's racist occupation of DC. So you may have seen videos, for example, from the Columbia Heights neighborhood, which has a lot of immigrants in it, of just masses of neighbors coming together and chasing ICE out of the neighborhood, shouting them out, until they leave, exposing them. Sometimes they try to hide and act like residents and locals and stuff. And, there's a lot of, amazing things coming out of there because that's a neighborhood that ICE specifically targets. Outside of that, on the organized side of things, for the DC Alliance, we're helping to build a coalition of organizations from across the DMV, much like what Chicago has in the Coalition Against the Trump Agenda. In DC, we have the DC Against Trump Coalition, where we're basically trying to do the same thing, bring everybody who wants to fight against the Trump, occupation into one place and get as many people into the streets as we can. You see right there footage of our first action where we had hundreds of people out there at these one of these racist curfew zones where MPD essentially targets Black youth. This was started by the DC City Council, but is of course been amplified and turned into a wide net for the occupation forces. And so we felt it was important to challenge that curfew zone first. And so we shut down the U Street corridor last week. And we intend to keep doing that and so much more until the occupation becomes untenable.
And Richard, can you talk about how organizers here in Chicago are preparing as we face this threat?
Yeah, so I mean, there was an action yesterday. We held a press conference almost immediately, and what I feel like is unique is that a lot of our folks, we remember all too well what 2020 felt like. So a number of our comrades were already in motion, in pace. We had a lot of infrastructure already built. Some of it was just like dusting some old tactics off as it relates to mutual aid. This is a new threat, right? This is new. There's nuance to what we are facing here in the city of Chicago, but we're covering we're checking all the boxes. We're getting prepared for whatever is coming. And the first step, which I'm most proud of, is that we turn to community, like what are the needs of community in this moment. We are preparing, the know your rights piece, because even me as a executive director of a nonprofit, I don't know exactly what my rights are going to be, as it relates to interactions with federal law enforcement and the National Guard. So we want our people and our communities that we serve to be as knowledgeable as they possibly can be on what their rights are under the circumstances. We're propping up, again, mutual aid, direct financial assistance. We're doing mass trainings as it relates to know your rights. We'll also be canvassing the communities, because we saw what happened in DC. And from that, I think not fear, but I think learnings, right, as it relates to how they were targeting folks at public transportations, how they were targeting the homeless, how they were targeting youth. And so those populations and those places are the places we're going to focus our work and our efforts around to secure and ensure safety.
Merawi, I've been particularly drawn to the way the federal government has been treating the houseless population. Can you talk a little bit about what you've been seeing and how that population of people and community members are being cared for in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's what's been described. There's roving police gangs, 10 to 20 deep. From DEA, ATF, HSI, Park Police, FBI, MPD, following around like a clown car, being led by the nose by all these different organizations, and essentially jumping out on anybody. Homeless people, people driving, and it's really kind of catch and release kind of system, playing for numbers. Grabbing people for anything that they can. I know somebody who was given a ticket because their license plate was on their car crooked. You know what I mean? A $10 crooked, and now they're in the DC jail system. Waiting for their whatever docket or whatever. And so now, homeless people are experiencing, similar things. I haven't seen a mass, kind of push of homeless people that they were threatening to do, but homeless people, this is the whole thing is, the whole point here is that it's a terror project, and they'll target anybody they can. And I also do think it's important to just point out the fact that we are modeling our work after what Chicago has done, already. Our brother Richard has already mentioned, that there was stuff already in place. Y'all coalition already had 100 members in it. You know what I mean? And we're still, kind of in the early dozens, working to kind of get to that level of work. And it's also true that that coalition is full of like people from the labor movement, people from, of course, the Black Liberation Movement, Immigrant Rights Movement, all these different organizations, anti-war movement, and also the mayor is now a part of this whole kind of, full court press that they're preparing for the invasion. Meanwhile, in D.C., we don't even really have a mayor at this point. She's folded, like a chair. Essentially, I don't know if you saw her press conference, but she was thanking Donald Trump for the work that he's done, reducing crime, when actually it's not even reducing crime. It's just this martial law and it's resulted in people just kind of staying in the house for a while. But the sources of crime, the poverty that exists and generates crime and reproduces it year after year, have not been addressed. And so, for her to kind of put on this show, it just kind of shows us that like has been already mentioned, there are people who are ready to to just fold, and we have to build our resistance with everybody else. So anybody who wants to fight, we want to fight with them. Anyone who wants to stand against Trump, we want to stand with them, and that includes people on the council.
What would you say to the people within Black communities who are saying, actually, I do want a so-called, an immigration crackdown. I do want the federal government to come in and take these, people who have, some people feel like they've caused strain on the community. And there's been real tension here in Chicago around the migrant crisis. Rich, what is your messaging to that group of people who say, like, yes, I want the federal government to come in to remove immigrant communities because they've caused a strain?
Yeah, I would like to. I mean, I think I would almost start the conversation with, does divestment from that actually produce resources for you and your family, right? Like, in what ways, and has there ever been a moment in history where the U.S. government has collapsed on anyone, and the end result was benefits for Black people? You know what I'm saying? Like, they're, I've also wrote an op-ed that landed in the Tribe that talked about my grandfather's experience migrating to the city of Chicago during the Great Flight from the South. He came up from Arkansas, um, and he migrated to the South, and he faced a ton of racism. And so I would beg for us not to mimic, the actions of our oppressors, right? There's never been, like, we can't move forward without, without each other. I think the city of Chicago has been unique in that way. Like, we've come together for decades, and just, for multiple moments in movement history. So, I don't. I would want to listen and hear these folks out. You know what I'm saying? I think I want to hear them folks out. Like, what are the real tensions? And then to get down to the point where we have a better understanding of where these pressures are coming from. Um, because the reality is that our folks are, are experiencing a ton of trauma in the city of Chicago. And we all believe and we have a vision of a world where our folks are living trauma free. Um, and the pathway to that is not by oppressing other people. The pathway to that is investing in schools. The pathway to that is, ensuring that everybody has access to living wage employment. The pathway to is ending mass incarceration. The pathway to is, the beautiful actions of, ending money bond, right? Um, oh wait, I don't know what happened here. Can y'all hear me? Because my
Morgan, you're on mute.
okay, I'm back.
We
That was a
lost Rich for a second.
yeah.
Okay,
So
you're back.
yeah, I would just remind them of those moments in history where we face similar forms of oppression. I would unpack, the trauma that I think our folks are living through and living in, and really get to some real causes and solutions. But I'm not one to just ignore folks. You know what I'm saying? Who have these particular opinions. But I would want to sit there and unpack it with them to really get to the core of where their trauma lies, right? And in general, it's the state. And so, yeah, that would be my way of responding to them people.
Merawi, outside of the organizing community, when you're encountering people, do they understand what this moment really means? Do they feel a calling to resist? What is the sentiment from people who you are encountering as you're doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I just want to add to what Richard said is that it's also important. You know what I mean? That's just kind of the first stage. At that, at the point that it becomes necessary, it'll be Black people filling those detention centers, all across the country. Everybody else who was there to stand up against all kinds of oppression that they want to bring down on us. And so I think that that's the first thing. The second thing is that these kind of anti-immigrant voices in the Black community are a minority, relatively speaking. I think your microphone might be pretty loud, Morgan. But yeah, these anti-immigrant voices in the Black community are a minority, especially. I mean, just to go to your question to me, our actions are divided. There are white people, there are immigrants and brown people, and there are Black people at our actions. Everybody in D.C. wants to fight. Majority of the city hated the fact that Mayor Bowser folded and is now facilitating the occupation of D.C. Every action is full of people who are excited at the opportunity to let out their righteous rage against what's happening in their city, and white people, their rage at what's happening to Black and brown people. You know what I mean? And I think that the most beautiful imagery that we're kind of generating in these things is imagery of multiracial, multinational, masses of people who are going out into the streets to defend Black youth. You know what I'm saying? To defend Black people, to defend immigrants. You know what I mean? That's the most beautiful thing about it, and that's the most dangerous thing about it, is that everybody is now coming together against these people who benefit so much from our division. And Chicago is no different. From them busing all the immigrants to Chicago from Texas, Mayor Abbott, whatever his name is, this right-wing agenda, which is so clear on the need to divide Black and brown people in Chicago, since that, Black and brown solidarity was the root, the source of, Brandon Johnson's ability to defeat the racists that they were trying to put into office, you know what I mean, and everything else going on. That Black and brown solidarity, which is so powerful in Chicago. In D.C., we live in a city that's been divided, left and right, on racial lines, Black and white people, by, real estate developers and the politicians, some in city council and the mayor herself. And so we're now kind of getting our, solidarity legs under us, to really kind of develop this fight back.
Yeah, I don't think Chicago is necessarily out of the woods when it comes to still building that Black and brown solidarity. We've had some voices. I do believe that they are in the minority, because we've went out on the west side of Chicago and we've looked for the African American ladies who are screaming for President Donald Trump to come. We found one. I'm not gonna lie, we found one, but you know, as we surveyed the area, we didn't find many. Most people were like, no, thank you, we don't want that here. But unfortunately, the voices who are divisive are extremely loud. They're on the internet every day. They followed Brandon Johnson to Washington, D.C. to the congressional hearing. They are at the city council meetings. They're streaming to YouTube and TikTok and everything. And they have, you know, they're on Twitter screaming whenever the tribe ever does an article. Like, these are very, very loud people. Rich, can you talk about maybe who these voices are, and maybe, and what you think in your organizing, what you think these voices are seeking to do?
Oh, okay. Now I get what you're talking about, and I wouldn't sit down and talk to them. Okay, I know what you're talking about now. I think I got a little bit more clarity. And those are chaos agents, right? They're not here to seek. I mean, they're not interested in learning about racial solidarity. They're not interested in unpacking anything that is what we consider progressive. Um, they're hired voices. They're funded to do exactly what they're doing. They are fulfilling a job. They have no base, right? Like I'm an organizer, and I believe in base building. Base building for me is a consent building process, right? It is, if I'm going to speak on behalf of Austin, Inglewood, West Garfield Park, I'm going to go and have conversations with those people first, right? And then I'm going to come back and speak on what it is that their vision for the city of Chicago. And so, you know, all of that stuff cancels out when it comes to time for election. Because if you ain't done that work, you ain't winning nobody. You know what I mean? Like, and so with some of those folks, you know, I choose not to, you know, I don't even engage, because I know what it is. Like, spot it, got it. I know what that is. I got identify, but I can't spend my energy there. I got real people in Chicago that are hurting. I got real people in Chicago that are confused by them and by this administration. Those are the people I'm going to win. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like we got to continue to focus our efforts in those communities, because those voices become the only voices. And I think that we got to do a better job of, like, when the tribe posts an article, like, you'll see the hate, but the love needs to show up, you know, because there's a lot of people that love what you do, and what we all do. And we got to do a better job of being intentional about making comments about, like, yeah, I love this, I support this, whatever the case may be. And then people will win more of our people to you know, our lines that way. But yeah, they got, yeah, I know who you talking about. We don't buy, you know, we ain't worried about them people, man. Like, we really organize in the city of Chicago. We know last year E conducted racial unity dialogues throughout the entire year, right? That's commitment, you know what I mean, between black and undocumented folks, formerly incarcerated and undocumented folks, and they talked about their carceral experiences, right? Very, very uniquely connected, right? And so, like, yeah, it's not, I ain't got time for them people. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think none of us really got time for them people, but they there. But, you know, I think it, you know, they're getting funded to be there, you know. And that's their role right now. I always think about Harriet, but I won't go there. But anyway, so, like, not everybody wants us to get free. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, but we got freedom on our minds in Chicago, and we gonna continue marching towards our destination. I do also know that there's a lot of work as it relates to racial solidarity. It is not, you know, just we don't just throw the term out lightly. It is work. It is labor. It is being committed to be in conversation, to be in community. It is hiring interpreters, right, so that folks can actually have real conversations. It's all of those things. So, you know, I'm impressed by what Chicago's up to and what we're up against. And I feel like at the end of the day, we're going to defeat whatever comes to this city, because we are working. You know.
I want to bring Council Member Zachary Parker back onto the stage for some final words. Okay, I'm like, I still want to be on the stage. Thanks so much for waiting, but I mean, I feel honored being in community with all of y'all Black men out here doing the work. I want to know, Council Member Parker, what is your message to public officials here in Chicago as to, like, what they need to know and how they can resist and show up for Black Chicagoans in this moment? I mean, you have family here, you have community here. How can public officials show up in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, the headline is you got to resist in whatever way that looks like for you. I think we all have different roles to play. I do want to shout out like the organizers, the folk on the ground, Free DC and others, Harriet's Wildest Dreams that have been organizing and doing the work. Like that work is necessary. The work we're trying to do here through policy and the legal process is necessary, and it goes hand in hand. But it starts with being clear on what your principles are, where the red lines are. I will say the mayor's comments don't reflect where I am, and I don't think they reflect what the majority of Washingtonians are demanding in this moment, which is for us to push back on this overreach. So, if nothing else, it's about identifying the roles that folk have to play and resisting in whatever way that looks like for you.
Your mic is muted.
Oh, forgive me, y'all. Okay. Richard, you were there when Mayor Johnson was signing an executive order to resist um, Trump, and also to make some clear guidelines for the Chicago Police Department. What does that executive order mean to you? What are you seeing from our local officials at this time?
Yeah, I think I want to, salute to our city council members, salute to the mayor in this moment, right? What essentially it was, an opportunity for them to create some level of deference between the National Guard, federal agencies, and the local police, right? That and our demand was, no Trump and no coordination, right? And so this was an opportunity for the mayor to say, yes, I agree on the no coordination, and this is the way within my powers I can actually produce some level of deference between the two, right? And so, I was there for it. A lot of our community wanted to be there. We're going to be going over there today to do a little photo with them. But at the end of the day, it's a signal to us that the local administration that we voted in is in support of what it is that we need to do. And I think that's important for us as we're on the ground doing this organizing, that we know that there's people in the administration that support what we need to do in this moment.
And I think creativity is important, right? Because we don't really have a roadmap for how to resist this type of fascist takeover that's taking place in our government. So we have to experiment. We have to try things. Merawi, can you talk more about just like the experimentation spirit that you all are having, and what's that's like as you're trying out different tactics on the ground?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, a couple of things come to mind. One is I think on the side of city council, uh, there's a sanctuary values act which was suspended or constricted by this federalization of DC. But from my understanding, that sanctuary values act can be expanded. The powers of it can be expanded. Outside of the ways that it was restricted, and yet I think city council is in recess right now. I think that they can be brought back in an emergency. I'm not sure what the conversation is around that, but this seems like a great time for the city council to be in session as the city is under siege. But I think on the side of the organizing, creativity. I mean, it's two aspects. Of course, there's innovation is required, but there's also some conventions that will that work. We know boots on the ground work. People in the streets, in direct challenge of the occupation work. Following them around, police watch, harassing them around town, things that make this generally untenable for them work. And I think all these things help to raise the level of struggle and consciousness of everyday citizens around the city. Because, of course, all they can do is target a few people here and there. They'll never have the numbers to really be able to surveil and harass and imprison every person in the city. And so, in a city full of people who are ready to fight back, who are ready to, take up a camera to resist, to fight, to, harass people trying to, kidnap their neighbors. Such a thing can only go on for so long, and as expensive as it is, it just becomes more and more deeply unpopular, not only with us but with people around the country. And I think that's kind of the things that we know that work. And I think the particulars can become creative about how to apply that mass pressure, but we know that mass pressure is the way through. in conjunction with help from our, elected officials. I mean, hope to see our officials in the street and supporting mass movements, with discretionary funds and any other way possible, because anybody standing against this, this occupation, we want to stand with them, and that really does mean everybody, we want to build the broad.
So for people who want to get involved, you all, wherever you are in your work, how can people tap in? Merawi, let's start with you. Some groups or resources that people can tap into.
Sure. I'm with the DC Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression. We are one organization within this coalition, which is named the DC Against Trump Coalition. And this coalition is any organization, anybody who wants to fight. We want, this is the big tent, that we're helping to build. And that's where I would push people to come. If you're an individual, we want you to get in an organization, any of the members of the coalition. But if you're an organization, we want to holler at you and get you in there. And help us to mobilize and fight back. So DCAT is a DC coalition. That's where I would say people should go.
Councilmember?
Yep, you can find me on ZacharyParkerWard5.com. Follow me on social media, ZacharyForward5. I would say we are doing multiple things. One, trying to support as much as possible organizers in the streets, trying to block attempts to overturn our laws and ramp up carceral approaches, which are coming from the U.S. Attorney's Office, for instance. And we are mobilizing Ward 5 neighbors. So tonight we will be in the streets. On next week we'll be on the Hill trying to rally our congressional partners and also supporting the work that organizers have long been doing. So it's multifaceted, and this is going to be a long haul.
And Richard?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Rich Wallace, Equity and Transformation. The coalition that we have is no feds, no coordination. Shout out to, the Black Voter Movement Project, ICER. There's a number of organizations. Chicago is organization full, and many of the organizations that you may know are involved in this coalition in one way or another. We have about 50 organizations that are in the coalition. We'll be doing mass teach-ins on the Know Your Rights piece. There'll be a training the trainers this Thursday, and then Saturday we'll be doing our first mass training. So go to one of our websites. You can go to E.org Chicago, at E.org Chicago, to get updates on the teach-ins. We'll also be doing a lot of mutual aid distribution. We need help, right? So come on out and help pack some of these go bags for community folks. They may need specifically the unhoused populations. They're going to need a specific kind of love right now. And so we're trying to do our best to put that love in a bag and get it to them. So if you got free time and you want to come out to just pack a bag or pack a few bags with us, we'll have updates on our website, which is www.eatchicago.org, or on our Instagram, which is E.org Chicago on Insta. So just follow us and or any of the other organizations that are part of the coalition.
I forgot to mention, Morgan, that we're having an action, a mass cop watch this Friday night at the Navy Yard train station. So you can just follow DC Against Trump on Instagram for more information.
And lastly, for the tribe, we are a Black-owned independent publication. We need you all to join our newsletter. You can go to TRiiBE.com. That's the TRiiBE, and you can become a member. You can join our free newsletter. And in our free newsletter, we have a section that is a call to action section. So we share information about what grassroots organizers are doing and how you can get involved. So for those of you who want to do what you can to meet this moment, definitely follow the tribe. We'll be on the ground covering the mass movement that's taking place, and also this occupation that will be touching down at any moment. So I want to thank all of you so much for being here for our first video session in a very, very long time. This is WTF America, because what's happening? Y'all take care.
Appreciate y'all.
We should be able to just end the stream, right?